I think that rings true to my thinking lately. Was I kind of envision I like visuals like a graph or a chart or something like that, but I just kind of imagine like your life story is this timeline that goes birth to kind of where you are now. And then at each point, there's like a high or a low that's very memorable, and that's maybe your trauma could be one of those. And then you have an opportunity at that point to continue along that line and maybe go down a little bit as a diminished copy of yourself because of the trauma. Or you can break from that event and go in an alternate reality that's all about growth. And that's, I think, the perspective that you're talking about. These things can, growth is about having a newfound perspective. And you can always go back and visit that traumatic date, like on an anniversary. If you linger there too long, maybe you'll go back to that feeling that you had when you first found out. And it can be a dark day for you and maybe a dark week. And this is part of the process. I think that's okay. But to just, if you can, drop the backpack and look at where you are right now today and how far you've gone. It's a wonderful perspective that you have that you didn't have before. So that's all part of growth too. So that's what it kind of means to me.
See, Paul's got his hand raised.
So Gerbil actually brought up a really good point. Dealing with post-traumatic growth and setbacks. I know there are some things that hit the setback button for me pretty hard. Webb, I don't know if you've ever dealt with any of the guys. Well, remember Brian from last time we did this. So, talking to Brian, listening to some of the stories that he was bringing back up, obviously it's coming from his perspective. There were huge memory gaps in there for me, and a memory gap on critical incidents where, yeah, there is an emotional trauma that's involved with a lot of these incidents, where your friend gets his foot blown off or something like that, and for me, missing the memory of it is probably one of my bigger setbacks. It will actually slow down my growth quite a bit, and it puts me in reverse. Probably in that same vein, if I drink too heavy, which I have been known to do once or twice, if I drink too heavy, I can actually hit a setback where my explosive temper starts coming back out again, and that's never a fun thing to be around for anybody, including myself. Those are some of the setbacks that I hit, and obviously revisiting the site, and like Gerbo was saying, if I dwell there too long or dwell on that memory too long, it can really hit the reset button for me on a lot of this growth. I didn't know what y'all's feelings on that were, or what your experiences are, but that's something that is in the back of my mind, and that's something in the back of my mind as I get older, because, well, obviously, as we get older, we start to lose a little bit more. And I'm talking about much more advanced age, probably closer to end of life type of older. But that's something that I do have some concerns about. What do y'all?
I can speak to that. I wanted to mention about what Brad had said about being on lockdown, so to speak, and then still him going out and doing something. He said, "Oh, well, I can still do something." I think there's kind of a trend there with what Greg had mentioned earlier about you didn't say I can still do something, but basically what you're saying, even if I can only give 10% help to somebody, I'm still doing something. So there's kind of a trend there, I think, with that same mindset with some people that have experienced similar things. It's like, well, if I can't do anything, well, if I can't do 100%, maybe this is all I can get. And that's like the kind of, I think that's a path to, like, it's a long path, but making small incremental changes is about making make small changes to make that one big change a step ahead. And I think that seems like a commonality that I had noticed. But Yeah, like as far as setbacks go, I had talked to Brian on the phone for like 2 hours the other day just to like catch up, and it was weird to me because he was reminding me of things that I had completely forgotten. And when I realize that I don't remember those things, I feel slightly debilitated. And that is where, for me, in that type of situation, that's where a setback can come for me, because it's kind of debilitating and I can't remember something. But he was telling me, "Do you remember when?" And I would say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." And then he would say this, that, and the other, and then it would take me a moment, and I would remember only bits and pieces of it. And that was definitely a setback for me. Even one of your guys, initials JM, I'm apparently, I met him. I spent weeks with him, smoking cigars at a fire pit, and I had seen him when we were on that, that training event together, and it was like I had seen him for the first time, but it was the same for him, which was also interesting. So yeah, that's a bit of a setback, but at the same time, when someone else tells me that they have that same problem, it doesn't make it as bad for me. So.
Brad, did you have your hand up?
I did. I think Dan's got something to say. I think he was reaching for the mic, or no?
Oh, I was, but if you had something, go for it. It was just, I was going to be willing to share a story on setbacks and different types, but I guess I had a question for you guys too, and then maybe this is good for the larger audience. When we talk about those setbacks, I mean, what is it? Because there are different symptoms of PTSD. There isn't just this one broad thing. I mean, there's anxiety that comes, depression, the ability to maintain relationships, things like that. So I was just kind of thinking about it as you guys were talking, and it just raised a story to me, and I'll share it quickly. But it's you guys all know my event. I got blown up in Iraq, and I actually just found this out. I had a 1% chance of living. The doctor in Baghdad, ER, contacted me just like a month ago out of the blue. I don't know how he got a hold of me, but man, it was a wonderful conversation. And he actually shared some photos with me and some documentations from that day, and talked about how much it meant to him. And but anyways, but so going from that type of recovery, when I was going through that I guess I'll say darker road of PTSD, the early stages of it, what I had found to be kind of my strength and my energy to move forward in a positive way, well, it was my kids, it was my children. It was their relationship, the relationship I have with them, that just really wanted me to get better and live a happy, meaningful life. But the setback was when I got divorced. And what it was, the divorce was, it was a separation of the ones that were giving me the strength and energy to move forward and come out of that deep, dark area. Oh my God, guys, I went into the deepest, darkest hole ever. It was so bad. And what it was, it felt like my lifeline was taken away from me again. And it wasn't the loss of my ex-wife, it was the loss of my children. And then the thoughts of what is life going to be like as a divorcee? I'm never going to see him. Never going to have the relationship I wanted. Well, the growth where it comes into play was when I did move to Chicago, and it was like, well, I have to be with them. I have to do whatever I can to create those meaningful relationships and spend time. So yeah, over the last 10 years, what I did was I probably sacrificed other relationships with girls I dated. I lived with a girl, and a lot of times it would be that tough balance of what was important to me and what was important to them. Well, my children were important to me at that time, and relationships were broken because of that. But that is part of that struggle, that continuum struggle of PTSD. It's not this one-off solution that we're going to feel better one day and things are going to go on. No, it's a struggle, a daily struggle, and then there's different setbacks. So again, with the loss of the children leaving, or separation, if I should say, it put me to this deep, dark depression. But then the growth was, well, let's spend time. So yeah, over the last 10 years, I'd get my weekends, not mine, days that are not mine. Make sure I pick them up, take them to every basketball, cheerleading practice, whatever it was. But that was investing that time and making it meaningful, building those relationships. But at the same time, we're still in that cycle of PTSD. So that's my story.
No, man, that's awesome. That's exactly it, man. It's finding your why, whatever your why is, whether it's your kids, your community, or some combination thereof. It doesn't have to be just one, just the other. It's whatever. And talking about what Webb was talking about with memories and losing some of them. There's I can't remember the name of the book. It's The Last Spartan, I think is what it's called. It's about this Green Beret dude that goes into this Afghanistan village and basically lives with them, like Rambo style, like First or Third Blood or whatever the hell it was. But he talks about the bonds he created with them because of that sense of community and like, hey, we're here for you. We are, here with you. We live with you. We eat with you. We exist with you. And and he talked at the end about how he wanted those to be the last memories he lost. The whole point of that being that really shook something in me to say like, hey, what memories matter to me? And I started thinking back, back to like deployments and like the hard times and the crappy times and the tough stuff and like the things that you don't want to do. And I started to realize, like, for the longest time, I was kind of living a life of where I was trying hard to forget those by like drowning them in way too much booze. Like, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy beers, and it's okay, I think, to drink a couple of beers. But I absolutely went overboard for a couple of years. And what I'm trying to get to now is to the point where I don't want to, completely forget everything. I don't want, in fact, I would rather remember everything than forget anything if I can help it. I think back to, our time with Team Lima, and I can tell you for a fact there was, an automatic 2 weeks afterwards. I don't remember shit. I remember like 2 or 3 experiences and that's it. But like, it's interesting to look at memory and like what your mind does to protect you in a way, and versus trying to not lose what you can. I don't know if you guys have any experience with that, but if you do, man.
Well, I'll just repeat one of my favorite quotes is that, joy shared is joy multiplied, grief shared is grief divided. Going back to that whole having a tribe, having your family, having your friends. And without that, yeah, we do tend to self-medicate and go through that process. You gotta have something. So one of them is more of a healthy outlet, I think. Having peers like you guys, having family. But then without one, you kind of have to do something, right? So it's kind of a normal. That's a very common story, the self-medicating part. Where it's not just an enjoyment thing, but it's an escape from or deafening the pain as much as you can. So the growth piece would be somebody who does the latter, and kind of goes for the whole peer thing, and that's rather than kind of taking it on yourself and whatever you can get to numb the pain, because all you're doing is prolonging, right, the growth. You're not really involved in it. And so, yeah, and then Dan, your story, man, I really appreciate that. One of my struggles when we were talking about, can you share a war story? I really have more of that human story, like Brad was talking about, like you were talking about with divorce and having your, the custody of the child kind of goes to the ex, and you don't really get to spend that much time with them anymore. And that you have to, I found that in my journey from those days, is that you have to give yourself some love. You got to forgive yourself. You got to accept yourself before you can even move on and even reach out to others. You have to kind of be good with yourself. And I really had to go through that process. It wasn't easy, but to get to a point where I'm like, this wasn't all my fault. I'm good with it. I'm a better person for it. And maybe I can be better now because I've forgiven myself. I'm not going to constantly beat myself up for having the relationship breakdown or whatever. So I think that's another. So there's a kind of an internal locus and an external locus. But having a tribe, having a group can be very helpful for the good and the bad. Obvious, right?
Talking about the effects of post-traumatic growth and how it can be positive, I wanted to share a story of something that had happened to me earlier this year. I think that I mentioned that the reading that we all went through and some of the education we have is like the resiliency versus post-traumatic growth. They're different. Resiliency being your ability to bounce back from something, and the PTG being your ability to experience, trauma or violence or PTSD, and then actually come out on top of that poor experience. I think some of the things that I had experienced in the past allowed me to move past an experience that I had this year. Not move past it like I want to forget it, but able to digest it and process it to where it wasn't completely debilitating to me. I'll share a really simple, this is a really simple deployment story that I had experienced that just still, for some reason, it just bugs me. We had suicide VBED come up and blow our cop up, and a couple of guys were buried. So incidentally, we were uncovering these guys, and we were really close to getting one of the guys out so that he could just get out of there. And we were trying to get this material moved away from him so we could pull him out. And it was those cots. You guys know those stackable cots. So I was cutting a stackable cot out of the way so we could pull this dude out. And I was cut this material and move it out of the way, cut this material, move it out of the way, grab this material, and I cut it, and it wasn't the cot. It was actually the guy's uniform. But it had all looked the same to me at that point because it was completely covered with rubble. And I saw the subcutaneous layer of this guy's leg. And I never forget that. It's such a really small, simple thing. Like it didn't kill him or anything, but I was trying to help this guy the best that I could, but then I went and I cut his leg. That always bugs me, but I've been able to get past that because I know that I was doing my best to try to help him. I know that I was doing the best that I could. I mean, if anything, I was doing 10% at least. But I cut, I cut him. I was trying to help him. That's always bothered me. But I've been able to get past that because I have thought about, what did all the effort that led up to before I actually, it was just a small little nick. But I always think about what did that effort lead up to? What did I learn from that? So I've been able to grow from that and several other experiences, but that's just one short example. So earlier this year, unbeknownst to me, my stepbrother had been having some real difficulties. He had been running a business, and he was a appliance repair mechanic, and he owned his own business. And I didn't know him very well, and I didn't spend a lot of time with him, so I didn't have a lot of close contact with him. But my parents were in Florida, and my stepbrother went missing. So I was kind of trying to, pay attention, see what was going on. There was a couple of notices out for him. My dad called me, and he said, hey, they found his car in this park. And I was in uniform, and he's like, they're not telling me anything. My dad was in Florida, so he couldn't do anything about it. We're up here in Maryland area. So I said, I'll go over there. I'll talk to the police. Maybe it'll help because I'm in uniform. I know that's not right, but if I could get him some information, then maybe that would help. So I went over there, and they didn't really have a whole lot of information. They were kind of looking around. It was a park, and there's huge vegetation around it in the woods and all this stuff. They showed me where his car was. So I kind of thought about it for a while, and I had the instinct that if that's where they found his car, you know, if he had done something to hurt himself, he was probably there. So I looked around just kind of haphazardly. I didn't really put any effort into it. What I was really doing was getting information from the police, talking to some of his friends that had been there to maybe, I don't know, maybe someone hurt him, pulled him somewhere. Maybe he was, I don't know, in trouble somewhere. So I ended up being able to go into the woods and find him. And he had, unfortunately, he had taken his own life. It wasn't a really, obviously, it's not a positive experience. But with the PTG that I had, you know, the growth I'd experienced in the past, I had some of the tools that I needed to move forward from that experience. And what I did was try and find what, they're not positives, but what did I actually do, like, that helped someone? And this is what I did. I went and I got my parents the information they didn't have. They knew their son was missing. They couldn't find him. They didn't have any information. They didn't know if he was hurt. They didn't know what it was. The police couldn't find him, but I was able to go in and find him and actually call my parents from there and let them know, hey, this is the situation. And not being a favorable situation that it was, I was still able to get them the information, but moving forward after that, I still think about it daily, but it's not interrupting me to where I can't perform. And it's not because I didn't care about my stepbrother, and it's not because it wasn't a poor experience for me. It's because in the past, I've been able to grow from some of the traumatic experiences that I have had, which have given me some of the resiliency to bounce back from that. And hopefully that makes sense. But I had already grown at that point. So I had the tools that I needed to go in there and find him and get my parents the information. But that's it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, man. You said, just reflecting back on everything you said bounce back a couple of times, and I was listening to something about post-traumatic growth. You can also think of it as sort of a bouncing forward. Like, you're not going back to where you were. You've learned, like you said, some tools now. So when trauma comes, and it will, you have those tools to be ready to deal, right? And to, you know, it's not a coping mechanism necessarily. It's something more. It's a positive, like a growth thing. So I think absolutely you can, you know, trauma can coexist with growth, if that makes any sense at all. But yeah, it's a powerful story, man. Almost like, you know, like there's a higher power guiding you to do stuff, you know, it's amazing. Thank you.
Hey, Webb. It's a hell of a story, man. I'm sorry you had to go through it. And I'm glad you were able to give some closure to your family. That's always hard. You reminded me of Cop Brunk as well. You know, that day, I honestly thought all three of you died down there that day. When we watched that gigantic dust cloud go up from Cop Ware, and I think we were running out the door about 5 minutes later. Part of that QRF, heading down to go see you guys. And up comes Bebop and Aaron Weber. Just, dude, it was quite a relief to see you. You probably should have been medevac that day. Probably. I know Hannibal definitely needed it that day as well. But one of the more important things that you did that day was everybody lived because of the actions that you guys had that day. Nobody died in the rubble. Nobody gave up. Everybody got out. And yeah, you did a hell of a lot more than a 10% solution, dude. I mean, you did a 99.9% solution with just a little bit of extra work in there. And you've always been a person that solves a problem for other people. And that is something that's been absolutely awesome to know about you, man. Even when you're struggling yourself, you've always looked out for other people, man. And it's what makes you an awesome dude.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
So I want to throw a couple ideas out to some people. You know, we talked about the 5 areas of post-traumatic growth, and I'm gonna kind of put an idea out there, but I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so to speak. But we look at these 5 things. We've got deeper relationships, personal strength, spiritual and existential change, sense of appreciation for life, and new possibilities. What I want to put out to you guys is to think about those things and try and think of some personal examples you could share, because I've got some in mind, and some of them relate to multiple of you here in this conversation right now. Dan, I can't even tell you, like the day we found out what happened to you, man, that was rough. That was rough, dude. I still remember exactly where I was. I was out on the South Range Hill on Dugway, and Matt Hefty called me, or MH, whatever. He called me and told me about, you were hurt, and I had to tell everybody else who was out there with us, but he gave me all the full details, and I didn't share them all right away, but because I figured you were gonna, be who you were and make it through, but things like that, they give you that sense of appreciation for life, like I really got to value what I have. I got to value everything I have right now, because how quick can it be gone? In a phone call, things can change in a second. Your life, not only your life, but other people's lives can change. Like, that wasn't my life that changed. That was your life, Dan, but it affected my life in an indirect way, and, have you guys experienced any type of growth from either, some kind of trauma-related event that affected deeper relationships, personal strength, spiritual change, appreciation for life, or new possibilities? Some kind of food for thought. Is there anything you guys could share about that? Go for it, man.
Speaking of that same instance that Greg and I just talked about, and my team leader had been medevac. He had he was all right, but his sinuses were completely perforated, and he was a team leader at that time. He was doing incredible work, amazing. Just the amount of things that he was finding and defeating, it was just absolutely amazing in that time. But after that, on our way home, he was smoking a cigar and then closing it off his nose and blowing smoke out of his ear. And they kind of, they didn't push him off to the side, but they put him on the desk. And they kind of just, it didn't seem like he got this amount of treatment that looking back that he probably should have got one or recognition too for all the things that he had done. But moving forward with the growth portion of it, that same guy now, he's been promoted 2 or 3 times after that. He's running marathons. He just qualified for the Boston Marathon, which is absolutely insane. The blast that he experienced in that time, it sent him like flying through the air for 27 feet. He got up after that. They put him on the desk. His head was all messed up, but he was still able to like move forward. Like when I talk to him from time to time, he's doing so much more than he was doing before that incident. I think I'm like, wow, this guy's a complete powerhouse. How does he do all these things? He's a complete machine. So I know that it's possible because of people like that. It's just like that. To actually qualify for the Boston Marathon, you have to be I'm not a runner, and I don't like it that much. So, but to me, you have to be a complete freak to be able to do that. So for him to be able to do all that stuff and get relegated down like that, and then come out on top, but also still be an absolute stellar performer in other areas of his life, a father, senior NCO, just completely amazing to me. He's one of my heroes. That's my example.
So I think where this is kind of going, and just at least how I'm viewing this is, each of you, everyone on this call we've kind of gone through that, and we still are. We will forever go through this growth. But I love what we're doing today. I think this is our next mission of sharing this experience and help educate others along the way, and maybe be that example or that little bit of inspiration for someone. And I'll give a quick story. A gentleman I worked with in Chicago, I was doing risk consulting work for several years, and worked at big corporate 500 company, suit and tie every day. And there's one guy, he comes up to me one morning, he goes, "Dan," he goes, "what is your goddamn problem?" He goes, "Do you ever have a bad day? Why do you walk in here every morning smiling?" I just kind of chuckled and back. All right, I'll call him Mr. S. Come with me in the office. Let's go talk. And I just said, I go, absolutely, I have bad days. I go, let me tell you a little bit about it. I just give him a couple of stories about what my night was like, dealing with the kids, doing this, getting home, taking the train home, long days, long hours. I go, absolutely. I go, but you know what? I go, if I could come in here every day with a smile and that little bit of energy feeds off to somebody else, anyone else in that room, and they're happy about being here today, and they go ahead and have a good, high-performing day, well, then it counts. It was worth it, And it's just those little things that if we could do that and do a little bit more and continue to do this, and I'll tell you what, right now, I'm in all the way, man. You guys, anytime you guys reach out, want to do more of this, I'm in. But that is it. I think that's our growth, and this is the next step of that growth.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one of the growth areas, the growth outcomes, is in your top 5, Brad, but an inner wisdom, an inner strength, an inner peace, something like that people feed off of that energy that you put out after you've experienced that growth. And not everybody does, but a high percentage that does say that they have experienced growth after trauma will usually have one of those categories as their thing. Maybe not all of them, but I think having an inner strength and a wisdom after the event is really helpful going forward.
Ed, what you got?
That's good info. Dan, I like what you said when someone asks you, "Do you ever have a bad day?" That's a really great compliment, I think, that somebody could give you. It's in general. It reminded me of something that I haven't forgotten. My wife and I went to an after-duty function, and she met this guy for the first time, and this guy had spent some time in the Ranger Battalion and some other places doing some specific missions and had some experiences. And I knew him, and I knew some things about him, and I knew that at that time he was having a tough time. But when he met my wife, I said, "Hey man, how's it going? This is my wife. I want you, meet my wife." And he was like, "Why, how's it going?" And then it's like, "How's everything? How is everything?" He's like, "Great." I'm like, this and that. He's like, "Dude, everything is so awesome right now. Life is great. This is great. That's great." He gave me a couple examples. He's like, this PT this morning was amazing, and I just did this and that. And then we walked away, and my wife was like, "I don't know that guy, but I really like that guy." She's like, "I really like him." And when I saw her reaction to what the positive, like that, just that positivity could do, that positive outlook could do, when I saw her react to that, anytime anybody asks me anything now, it's amazing. There's exceptions, obviously, but when someone says, "How's it going?" I'm like, "Dude, we are killing it right now. We're destroying it. We're chopping the mountain down. Life is amazing. You can't stop us. We're unstoppable." And they're like, "Oh, wow, these guys are really great." And I kind of took that lesson from the way that my wife reacted, so that reminded me of it. But yeah, I understand that. That's a good example. I appreciate that. Thanks.
That's you to a T, Webb. Very optimistic. I appreciate that.
It's a 50% real, 50% fake.
Hey, fake it till you make it, right? Nothing wrong with that.
Well, first and foremost, thank you guys all for sharing some really, really deep stories, and it just makes it all worth it to hear those. And I don't know, my takeaways are this. I think the biggest thing that we all kind of touched on in one way or another is that we don't know how others are feeling or what's going through their mind. But if we take the moment to listen, maybe try to learn, that there alone, that one step can be tenfold. And I again, just with I mean the stories, it just brought up so many other stories and just different parts of life where again, I think I hit it where I just said it's a continuous cycle. There is no end point to this. So hearing your story just really just kind of uplifted me. It gave me that little bit of motivation that I think I've been lacking since we've been on COVID lockdown. We don't take it that serious here in America like you guys do in Italy, but but we get those bit of setbacks, and they're always going to be there. So I don't know. I think I have more points, but I just appreciate you guys, man, and I'm happy to know people like you and keep inspiring others. I think that's where we go from here.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that, Dan, and 100% agree. And what I can hope we get from this, and by all means, if you guys have more to add, just raise your hand or unmute your mic, jump in. But like one of the big things we want to get out of this is to increase that communication. Like reach out to somebody, reach out, even if it's just one-on-one conversation, like just talk to somebody, man. Like if you're having trouble, you're having, some struggles, you're thinking about some hard times a little more than normal, or even just a lot, just talk to somebody about it. Like that's what a lot of this comes back to is, you're gonna experience hard times in life, period. Right? That's just what this comes back to is, that's life is you're gonna experience trouble. You're gonna experience trauma, and a big part of life is getting through that. Like that's this whole, like almost life is learning, and the whole wisdom part is helping others get through that as well as yourself. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I know I'm going to experience a bunch more in my life, and I don't know. I hope, all I hope is that what we talked about here tonight and what we communicated encourages other people to reach out when they need help, at the very least, and if not, amongst us. So if anybody's got anything else, please add in.
Well, just to pile onto that, something Dan mentioned that, yeah, it kind of reminds me of a conversation I had with my mom earlier today was the whole COVID thing, the whole lockdown. You know, a lot of people, even if they really don't think like I did before, I was telling before we hit record, you know, I feel like I've led this more or less Nerf life. You know, life is good, you know, and maybe I've got some different coping skills. Maybe I've just been lucky. But man, I didn't really think about it. But yeah, I think we're all struggling through this whole, like, what's our normal now? Like, you know, I feel like a walk around the neighborhood is a celebration for me because I can actually do that without having to wear a mask or be looked at funny or yelled at. It's like, hey, that's a normal guy trying to get some exercise in his neighborhood. So, and a lot of people are kind of going to social media to either kind of vent out or like read in, and it's some crazy times, man. And with the election year and everything, I think there's a whole lot of people struggling, whether they realize it or not. So yeah, my hope too to the general audience out there, you know, if you can't connect with this whole veteran vibe of experience with post-traumatic growth, just find out what it means to you. Like, just take stock of what's going on, understand yourself a little bit, maybe a little self-awareness. Say, yeah, I could improve on this a little bit if I just kind of call my dad or whatever that, you know, we're saying we can't do, you know, just something, one little thing would be wonderful if they could just take that away from this. And again, I'm going to say welcome aboard, Dan. I think it was awesome having you here, and always great to see you too, Greg and Webb and Brad. Thank you.
Webb, Polly, either you guys got anything to add?
I don't have much to add, but I guess I'll put in a plug. To reach out to people, make sure we're connecting with people. Like it's been mentioned by both Dan and Gerbo, we are in COVID. Up here in the Northeast, we're in a pretty decent COVID lockdown right now. It's not as bad as it was earlier in the year, but it's still worth it to make the connection. Yeah, it's more difficult now, but it's still worth it to reach out to people, whether it be through phone call or what have you. I know I have a 45-minute drive to and from work, and normally I'll spend at least a portion of that trying to reach out to somebody, whether it be a family member or somebody that I know needs the phone call at that point in time. Try to make the connection. And as I said in the beginning, it might not be the perfect answer, but it's at least a step in the right direction. So just keep it up and keep on reaching out.
Thanks again. Thanks for moderating this. You do a great job. Really appreciated being part of the conversation.
All right, cool. We'll wrap it up there. Hopefully everybody took something away from this, and if not, please, let us know.